Hey, welcome to another episode of the Do Good Work podcast. Today we are talking to Kim-Adele Randall. Kim-Adele is a leadership advocate and an award-winning author, speaker, mom, and face whisperer. She couples her 25 years of experience in the corporate world with lessons garnered through her journey to help others achieve sustainable transformation for professional and personal success. She is currently writing her forthcoming book, Authentic Achievements, the 7 Secrets to Building Brave Belief, Unstoppable Sales, and Turning Your Leaders into Talent Magnets for Guaranteed Sustainable Growth, based on her 30 years of experience delivering just those results for organizations including Iris, Sage, and Barclays. And she is on a mission to help leaders step into their authentic confidence and lead with kindness, courage, and humanity. Kim-Adele, we're finally here on the pod. It's been back and forth for a couple months, but it's an honor.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you now.
This is really exciting. We're going to dive into specifically the book that you're writing. We were just having a conversation around that. And I'll repeat the title here, The 7 Secrets to Building Brave Belief, Unstoppable Sales, and Turning Your Leaders into Talent Magnets for Guaranteed Sustainable Growth. Those are when I run teams, when I lead teams, run my business, etc. I want to tie into the belief part because that can be overlooked, but sales is what everyone desires and needs. But the key thing is once you solve the sales equation, it is how do you foster talent to continue to grow, which is the most important piece beyond you. So I'm pretty thrilled to have this conversation and learn more about these principles. And how did you know to focus on these 3 things really?
Yeah, thank you. It was, I guess when I started to write the book, I looked at it for what's been the key threads that have run through my life. So I started off, I run my own business. I've been in corporate life. I spent the last 5 years consulting for multi-million pound organizations, and they all want the same 3 things.
Yeah.
It's all about how do they get the belief in the team, in the company, in the clients. So
Mm,
that belief piece is in getting people to buy into the why them.
mhm.
And then that drives your unstoppable sales. Because once people align to you, once people go, oh, you do what I need, and they're listening to what you're talking about, and they're going, that's me. So actually, they're no longer being sold to. They're
Mhm.
proactively buying from you because they want in, whether that's as a team member, whether that's as a client, whether that's as a supplier. It's like how we create that kind of purpose and drive. And then when we think about one of the biggest things, irrelevant of what's been going on externally in the world, over the last 30 years, we've had recessions, we've had the financial crisis, we've had
Mhm.
change in governments, we've had political and civil unrest. Those things feel very different in the moment, but actually they're pretty constant through our life, sadly.
Just
And so what I also have found has been the constant is it comes back when we sat in the boardroom, it comes back to the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Have we got the right plan? Do we believe that we are on the right tracks and
Mm,
that we know why we're going to deliver this? Have we got unstoppable sales? Do we know where the business is coming from? Do we know how to repeat and replicate that? And
mhm.
are we certain that it's future proofed? And if not,
Mm,
do we know what's happening in our future so we know that we are ready for those next evolutions?
mhm.
And that future proofing really comes down to your talent. So, how do you
Mm,
attract and retain talent? One of the biggest issues we've talked about in the last year has been the talent war. The fact that actually it's the talent that have got control at the moment because everybody
oh,
wants them
yeah.
and they know that. So, actually, how do you win the war for talent? You win the war for talent by being the place that the talent wants to go because they know they're going to get the growth and
Mhm.
the value that they deserve. So those 3 things for the 30 years have always been consistent. And so I looked at it and went, well, I've started off running my own business from scratch. I've ran startups, scale ups, and I've run multi-million pound, billion pound global organizations.
Hey.
What's the constant? What's the thing that is the same that runs all the way through?
Mm,
And it comes down, in my opinion, to those 3. And then when we sit underneath it, there's 7 key steps to success. There's 7
mhm.
secrets, which if you get those right, if you understand what they are for you
Mhm.
and for your business, then the rest of it becomes effortless. Not
Interesting.
easy, but effortless.
Yeah, nothing really is easy in my opinion. I think it's simple and like, but there is significant effort. It's effort, but I think what you mean is it becomes like second nature where you're now leading and
Yeah,
orchestrating, and it's not as the momentum is there. No, I was just gonna say
complete.
I love the fact that this is from experience. Like that to me means volumes. That this is like behind closed doors. Here's like what still is most prevalent. I love to dive into the
Yeah,
seven secrets, but I also want to tie it back to an understanding and not assume like why focus on belief? Because this is the first time that I've heard that, okay, we need to focus on having this belief system. And I have some questions around that too, but maybe that'll get answered as we go through the seven secrets.
yeah. But I think what I've identified over the last 30 years, whether that's in business or in life in general, is it comes down to what we believe. If we believe that we can, then we'll
Uh-huh.
keep going. We'll find a way. If we believe we can't, we'll find a million excuses. And most people that know me know I live a quote. The quote that I use in this particular scenario is, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. And if it isn't, you'll find an excuse.
Mm,
And they're the bits that I play back to people very often now when they say, "Oh, it can't be done." I say, try repeating that back to yourself with, "It's not important to me," and see how it
dang.
feels. Because if it feels painful, you probably want to ask a different question.
Yeah.
But if, when it's not important to me for that to happen, then actually, it's not really your goal. And it's not about trying to be harsh with people. But one of the most important words in the English language, in my opinion, is the word yet, because
Mm,
it changes our psyche. So if we say, "I'm not good at this," we immediately create all these thoughts and feelings in ourselves of why we can't do something, why we're bad at it, why it's not very good, why we're not very good.
mhm.
If we say, "I'm not good at it yet," we move our brain to the part that says, "Okay, let's see what I've done already. And how does that
Mm.
compare to what I did previously? Oh, look, I'm getting better. So I'm not good at it
Possibilities.
yet, but I'm better than I was." And I use this with my little girl all the time who's 6. And she'll come home and it's always like the fait accompli. It's like, "I'm not good at colouring." I'm like, "Maybe you're not good at colouring yet, but let's have a look at that. How good is your colouring today versus yesterday?" "Much better, mummy." "And how much better was your colouring yesterday than last week?" "Well, it was a lot better." "Oh, how do you feel about colouring now?" "I'm getting good at it, aren't I?"
Oh,
You,
wow.
but what it then means is she now wants to go and immediately do it. And it works whether it's a reading or writing. But I've used similar with colleagues and team members for
Mhm.
30 years. They come in and their belief is the thing that's getting in their way. And our
Mm.
belief is often the thing that gets in our way of managing those performance challenges. So if
Incredible. Yeah.
people come in and don't do what we want them to do, we assume it's because they're trying to get it wrong. Well,
Huh.
do you ever go into work and try and get it wrong? Do
Never.
you ever
Yeah.
get up in the morning and go,
That's not the goal.
"I wonder how to be really rubbish at my job today"? What? I don't think there's an exception that proves every rule, but I don't believe anybody intends to get it wrong.
Yeah.
So when I give anybody developmental feedback, I start with, "Can we just start with what I think you're trying to achieve?" I believe that you're trying to be a great team member. I think you're trying to achieve the company goals. I think you're trying to really add value to the team and to your clients. Am I right? They're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, yeah, brilliant. That's exactly what I want you to do." So I'm so thrilled that what you're trying to do is what we want you to do.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is help you see where there's a couple of things you're doing at the moment that get in the way of you achieving that goal. Are you
Mm.
happy for me to share them? Now, instead of me being attacking them, so I think that they're stupid or not trying hard or trying to be difficult, I'm now their ally. Their goal is a brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm not just there to help them achieve it.
It's
So
a
they're
key lesson
much
in
more
leadership.
open-minded to taking that feedback.
No, it's really interesting because I think in order to become effective leaders, like in today's modern digital, remote, async, like all that, we do have to get to the psyche. We do have to be more beyond here's the skill set, here's the tools. It's more about how can I help you grow as a person first before you do the work. And that takes the next level of in terms I don't want to say it's just leadership, but it's a care, it's an empathy, it's a support, it's a fostering that talent because I think everything like the unstoppable sales and turning leaders into talent magnets, and creating sustainable success leads back to this hinge. Do you believe that? This is a run on words that are play on words, but would you say that in your writing, your experience, and what you're seeing is that mastering the art of belief is the hinge point, the most important habit to the other habits that open up or the other success points?
Absolutely. Completely believe it to be true.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I've seen it time and time again. So it's not just a theoretical belief. I've seen it work. And one of the things we touched on this briefly before I came on, I've just recently done a TEDx on belief. And the TEDx itself was on how to turn fear into hope to build brave belief. Because what we focus on is what we get. And when we think,
Incredible, isn't it?
it's just, it really is. When you really break it down and you think, that, what we're fearful of hasn't happened. We've had to imagine it in our brain. What we're hopeful for also hasn't happened.
Mhm.
We also have to imagine it in the same brain. So the same brain that created what it's like to be fearful, created what it's like to be hopeful. And yet
Mhm.
we choose to believe that what we're fearful of is more likely and more credible than what we're hopeful for. But we
Part of that is
create,
going against our human nature, right? Because we have the what is it? The amygdala. We have to find terror or issues in our environment to be safe. But I think it's now how do we thankfully we're in a generally safe
yeah,
lifestyle now. But I think it's how do we it's taking a significant in my opinion, like an effort to think that way to be able
yeah.
to
And I see it time and time again. We set our goals in a negative. But the amount of organizations that I've gone into and they go,
really
yeah, and they'll say things like minimum standards. We've got minimum standards, Kim. And I'm like, "Oh, please don't call them that.
okay.
It's okay to have minimum standards, but don't call it to them. Because imagine the people, because it all comes back to our people.
Uh-huh.
Imagine I'm working for that organization. I've worked flat out. I've worked really hard. I've done exactly what they asked me to do. I've achieved the minimum standards. I get to go home and say to my little girl, hey, Scarlett, guess what? Today, mummy was absolutely minimum.
Yeah, that's
How it feels. Whereas if we took the same standards and we
mhm.
called them standards of excellence, we just won't accept anything less. Same day, same result. But I now get to go home and go, hey, Scarlett, today mummy was absolutely excellent. Which one of them is going to give me more longevity with that organization? Which
100%.
one of them is going to make me feel valued and respected? And I see it in so many occasions where we set the goal about what we don't want. We're all very good at what we don't want.
Mhm.
But how many of us are really good at what we do want?
Yeah,
Who
writing
of
that
us
down.
say, I don't want to be in debt. I don't want to have lack of sales. I don't want to have, okay, so do you want? Because our subconscious brain is the happiest helper we're ever going to have in our life, but it comes with one very significant flaw.
Huh.
It doesn't understand the difference between help and harm. So whatever we tell it, it
Okay.
thinks is important. So if I say to it, I'm going to go and do public speaking,
Okay.
it will immediately, because I probably speak about a panic about it, even though I do it all the time, it will
Yeah.
run back into the library of my brain and it will bring back the memory that 28 years ago, I stood up in front of 600 people and told them that one of the charities we were about to support was Imperial Leather, which is a soap. And the
Yeah.
charity I'd known was Imperial Cancer. And I was mortified.
Yeah.
And despite the fact 28 years later, I've never said anything that stupid, it is the first thing that it will bring to me.
Huh.
And so I've learned over the years is to ask a better question. So I go,
Hmm.
okay, so I can get it wrong royally. Are there any occasions when I get it right, when I'm good at speaking? And what happens is that subconscious brain runs back to find all of the examples where you got it, where people wrote to you afterwards or rang you up because
Okay.
what you said touched you. So one of the big things that I think can really help people at the moment is when we find ourselves thinking about something that we don't want, ask ourselves, what do we want instead?
In creating
Focus
definition.
on that. Yeah, change that definition.
Yeah, because it matters a lot in my own personal life. It's okay, cool. You want this many sales or you want this kind of outcome. What does that actually look like tangibly? What is the actual and that takes more thinking, more brain power, more processing to be able to figure that out. But you mentioned so our subconscious doesn't understand harm versus help. So
That's what
whatever we say, it'll go to the worst case scenario. But if we ask the right questions, it can bring up the right scenarios or situations to empower us.
I said, so whatever we're saying to it, so if we say I'm bad at this, it
Mhm.
doesn't know that being bad at it is actually telling ourselves we're bad at something is actually going to harm us. It's going to make us feel bad. So because of that, because we've got I'm bad at this, it thinks, oh, being bad at this is really important to you. Let me go and find all the examples when you've been bad at it.
Yeah.
There we go. What's
Yeah.
because I'm trying to, what your subconscious is doing all of the time is trying to help you achieve whatever it is you ask of it. You
Crazy.
think for a moment of, have you ever gone to buy a car and you know the color and the make and the model?
Oh,
It really bought into it. And all of a sudden, all on the road is that car.
exactly.
And it's not because there's more of those cars around.
I
It's
beg to
because
differ. No.
because your subconscious brain now knows that it's important to you. So it
Mm,
filters it back into view. Whereas what happens every day is our brains are dealing with millions and millions of things constantly.
yeah.
So the only way it can cope with that is to filter things out of view that it doesn't think are important. It's why there's a game, it was done in the 1970s, and it is actually called Kim's Game. I'm not making it up. And I don't know if you've ever played it. There was a tray of things, and they'd come out with this tray of things. Everyone would look at it for a minute, and then
Mhm.
you'd put a cover over it, and one thing would be removed. And the reason the game works is because our brains filter out things that aren't interesting to us. So we'd all look at the same tray, but everybody would see something different on it.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
that would be the thing that we found the most interesting. It's why if you sat in a room of 10 people and you asked them to describe the room, you'll all describe it ever so slightly differently because you will have seen something that was that piqued your interest that maybe didn't pique theirs. And so I think the research, I can't remember if it was Stanford or Harvard, they did research and identified that we're using less than 10% of our brains all of the time.
Interesting.
Imagine what we could do if we tapped in to the untapped 90%. And they went on to do a further study that showed that they asked this group of people if they had a goal. And of those people that they asked, only 13% had a goal that they could articulate. Really specifically, they knew what that goal was. And of that same group, only 3% had it written down with an action plan. Even if it was a terrible action plan
Yeah.
that was never going to help them achieve the goal, they'd gone to the trouble of thinking of how they were going to do it and
Yeah.
writing it. And that 3% outperformed the next group, so the 13%, tenfold. Because it's a bit like, imagine you're like a sat nav.
Yeah.
So the first thing you do when you sit in your car with your sat nav is you tell it where you're going
Exactly.
because it can't take you
The
there if not.
direction.
And the next thing you do is tell it where you are because it can't plan the route if it doesn't know where you are and where you're going. And that's how we work all of the time. So it's how our brains work. It's our subconscious is our sat nav. But if we've not told it where we're going, it's going to
How
take
are we
us
going to
the wrong
get there? What
direction.
are we going to find in the environment to be useful? This is really, I absolutely love this because I try to practice and live this as much as I can, but it's always fascinating to learn deeper around how the brain works and hearing different examples because it's very powerful, life changing, in my opinion. And the key thing though is that right now we're discussing belief and it's also personal belief too. Like, how are you, is like, how is this going to help you in achieving what you want to achieve? But then you also tie this into helping others achieve. How do you, maybe this is a really interesting question. We can go in different angles around it in terms of getting buy-in and transitions, in terms of a company restructure or someone bought the company or like in real world scenarios, like how do you create influence and believability and trust and new leadership? How do you, if you're coming into a new team or if you're running a new company or you bought another company, or et cetera, how do you create believability in terms of them aligning their current belief systems to you and not having the negative part of the brain just look at like hard like ideas that may not be positive, not
Yeah.
be incongruent.
So,
Maybe this is a question around influence, this is a question around buy-in, this is a question about leadership, and how do we encapsulate that to work with others to achieve a common goal of success?
oh, great question. And one that, as a consultant, one of the challenges very often is people assume you've got all the answers. I remember going to one particular organization literally on day 3. They turned around and said, if you could just tell the board what you think's wrong and what you're going to do about it. And I was like, I've been here for 48 hours. So that it feels a tad judgmental. So,
Yeah.
but if you'd like me to tell you what I've observed so far from talking to people, from understanding it, then yeah, I can share that with you, which I did. And on day 8, I had to go back to that same board and propose a massive redundancy program because they
No.
were going to be running insolvent if they weren't careful.
Mhm.
And quite rightly, there were some massive concerns around that. This is people's lives. This is
Yeah.
people's livelihoods.
Not an easy
8 days,
decision.
yeah, 8 days in, suddenly trusting this consultant that's wandered in to share with you why that's important was asking a huge amount from them. So a large part of that was about acknowledging that there's a real level of vulnerability in this. And therefore, you've got to start by being able to share some of your own, because often we don't do that. We're told in business to never share vulnerability, to never show weakness, to never let anybody see where we're going. But actually, all that does is create a barrier for our people
Yeah.
because we're all vulnerable about something. So I remember on that particular occasion, and I got the board to understand that actually our options, unfortunately, were we make the decision now and make some cut, or we end up closing the entire business because we're insolvent. Which choice was less palatable? Well, less palatable was closing it and losing everybody's job. I was
Mhm.
like, right, in that case, our only option is to go with the first one.
Yeah.
And then I actually went out and led those redundancies. And I remember on the first day when we had to go and tell people, standing in front of, it was 1,400 people at the time.
Wow.
And I remember saying to them, the first thing I need you to understand is that this is not about you. And let me explain what I mean by that. It is happening to you. You are impacted. You
Mm.
have to live with the result. The reason I say it's not about you is you're not in this position because of anything you did. You're not in this position because you're not an amazing worker that I would love to have work for me for the rest of your working life. You're not
Mhm.
in this position because you're not great at what you do. You're in this position because unfortunately, I couldn't lead us to a different outcome. And for that, I am genuinely sorry.
Wow.
Um, and then I went on to share what we're doing. Now, I could have said, I've only been here 2 weeks. It wasn't really my fault that we ended up there.
Oh,
Now, the
yeah.
point was, people deserved to see the person be accountable for
Mhm.
where the business got. And whenever a business finds itself in those positions, the people that are let go are not let go because they're not great people. They're let
Yeah.
go because what an organization has to do in that moment is say, how do I move the organization forward to survive? And our
Mhm.
job as leaders, I've always believed our job as leaders is to save as many jobs as we can.
Mhm.
And sadly, we can't always save all of them.
Yeah.
But sharing that with people, letting them understand. That I said, the reason I share it with you is if you make it about you, you'll carry that into your future. You'll
Oh, yeah.
always
That'll
within
affect their own belief system.
you'll believe that you're going to be made redundant again. And I've met people over the years that have been made redundant time and time again
Wow.
because deep down they believe that
That
they're
they
not,
are that kind of person.
because they've made it about them. And when you start sharing with them, it was never about you. If you were not a good employee, you would have been on a performance plan. The fact that you weren't and you got made redundant is because of the environment. It's because the business couldn't navigate what was going on in
Mhm.
a different manner. And organizations that do redundancies do it because they expect to grow. They expect to come out the other side and continue to do business. And
Mhm.
so take the time and the effort to take people with us on that journey, even when it's a tough conversation. I used to turn up every week as we were going through the consultation and just run drop-in sessions with people. They used to call them coffee and cake, and then they wouldn't give me any coffee or any cake. I was like, could you please change the name? But it's like adding insult to injury. Not only have these
Yeah.
poor, like about to lose their job, they turn up to a meeting where they've got no coffee and cake. Which
Yeah.
but some of the funny things that people do, and they just don't think it. I think it through. And I remember on the very last day, people coming up and hugging me as they left. And I was like, you, you did this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not because I want to be evil or mean,
Yeah.
but because I wanted them to have had the opportunity to share how they feel with somebody who was accountable. And they said that was the thing. They said, we all know of people who had a very different experience of redundancy.
Yeah.
And that's because as a leader, it's uncomfortable. So you know that no one's going to message and you feel guilty that it's come to that
Yeah.
and a little bit ashamed.
It
And
definitely affects the mindset. Like I've known like even just having like dealings or with other people on teams or founders or it's that level of leadership, in my opinion, it sounds easy for you to say that, but it's actually that was must have been very difficult to move through that process. But then also to have people thank you, almost thank you for that. That's
Yeah.
incredible. How did you
And
manage the emotions too, like with the board or like with the leadership team to accept that this was the like how did you
it,
manage that?
I guess, yeah, I've always thought in like at our base as human beings, I believe we all want to be listened to, we want to be understood, and we want to be respected.
Yeah.
And that doesn't say we can't disagree, but we don't disrespect. So I
Mhm.
try and take that as my mantra into life in everything that I do, which is really listen to people, try and understand what's happening in their world. Where are they where are they coming from? Because very often we don't respond to what's happening. We respond to what we've made it
Interesting.
because we'll have added something onto it. So, a great example, I was chatting to a good friend last night and she was sharing with me, it was a personal story, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This story about the fact that she used to get really frustrated that when she'd come downstairs, there would be 3 or 4 seconds left on the microwave every day. And it drove her insane.
Yeah.
That was because her husband couldn't be bothered to wait the 3 or 4 seconds. That's what she'd made it mean. Fortunately, she asked the question, what's going on with the microwave?
Yeah.
Talked about it. He worked nights. And he said, what I didn't want is the Bing to wake you up. So I always
Oh.
stop it just before so that you don't get interrupted. So what had been causing her frustration as what she believed to be a lack of thought
Hmm.
was driven by total thought for her and what she needed. And I've seen work examples of that all of the time
Yeah.
where we look at something and we think we know what it is. I've gone into organizations for years and said to people, I if I do something that's really annoying,
Mm.
even if it's really obvious, trust me that I don't know because we have blind spots for a reason. We're blind to them. So
Yeah.
even if you think I must know,
Then I don't.
trust me that I don't. And unless you tell me, I will carry on doing it and I will irritate the living day. So can we get to that space? And doing that really helps because we look at things and assume people are going to get it wrong. I remember in one organization that I went into, they had just had their employee engagement survey.
Uh-huh.
And it said in it that they didn't think that the leadership team lived the guiding principles, their
Okay.
values. And they said, "Oh, it's okay. We're gonna come up with an action plan, Kim. We're gonna bring it in." And I was like, "Okay, great." So they came back with the action plan, and I went, "So the action plan they came up with was to put the guiding principles upon the walls
Okay.
and to encourage everybody to nominate each other." And
Okay.
I went, they didn't say they don't know what they are, and they didn't say they don't think they live. They said they don't think we live them. So putting them on the walls and getting them to nominate each other probably isn't going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
So why don't we go and ask them, what is it that we're doing or saying or being
Mhm.
that is leading them to believe that we don't live the guiding principles?
Yeah.
Because it's probably something in our blind spot. And if
100%.
we go and ask them, one, they'll know that we're genuinely interested in making it a great place to work because we've gone and asked the difficult conversation. I said, two, we will understand what it is that we're doing that we can then change. I said, but how do we get comfortable with the uncomfortable? Because going and asking them, going and say, I don't know how we do what we're doing that does this, means being a bit vulnerable, means
Yeah.
being a leader that says, I don't know the answer. So I'm
100%.
coming to you. But when we do that, we open up a space for people to tell us what their ideas are, but it also allows them to be vulnerable themselves. So that if something's not going the way that they wanted, they now know that it's okay not to be perfect and they can
100%.
share that in a safe space.
Such a powerful lesson too. We don't respond to what happens, that the meaning that we develop from what happens. That is really powerful. And I love the fact that we're diving into these specific nuances because these are things that, regardless of how good our technology is going to be, that we're still going to have to deal with this and work with this with each other and have these conversations, be vulnerable. I love to definitely, I know we had a really wonderful tangent around specifically belief. And I think that, again,
Mm.
I think it can be overlooked, but I think this steeps into everything that we do in business, everything that we do to run. effectively with teams. And I think it will steep into the seven secrets, but I'd love to go down the list of the seven secrets if you have,
Yeah.
you have it with you.
The first one is the effortless leadership revolution. And that really is about bringing your whole self to work, being being who you are and creating that authentic and safe space for yourself and for other people. And there's quite a lot of unpacking that we do within
Yeah.
that. Then we've got how to sell and scale successfully, the art of the possible. So how do we get people to stop the limiting belief and create that ongoing scalability that is effortless? And it all comes back to who are we serving, what do they need, and
Hmm.
how do we make that happen for them? We've got the 23% factor, which is about building a higher achievement culture fast, which is really about that engaging, attracting, retaining top talent. And to your point earlier, fostering that talent. How do we grow it within ourselves so that we're not always needing to look externally for what we need next? Next one is the price of fearless. Now, I guess that kind of pulls back a little bit to that TEDx around how do we flip the switch on fear and hope? And how do we get people to feel the fear, do it anyway? And we have to do that first, leaders,
Yeah.
if we do that for our people. There's the number one secret to eliminating conflict, which is the fifth step, because conflict is going to happen. Conflict happens all of the time.
And sometimes we need healthy conflict though.
Absolutely. Because if there is no conflict, what's probably happening is people aren't sharing stuff with you anymore.
Stagnation,
So
that's what that is.
Yeah. So conflict will be around, it will just be buried. And what happens when we're facing conflict is emotions have become involved, and we respond to those with either violence or silence. So either we get very angry, very aggressive, very loud. It's a little, I always liken it to playing Pictionary with my best friend. It's like she starts underlining it and I'm going, now I can see what it is. I just don't know what it is. You're going to have to draw something else. Underlining it isn't going to help me. When people start yelling, I'm like, saying it louder isn't going to take me
Is it going to help me
outcome.
process it differently? Yeah.
I need different words. Or silence, where we bury our head in the sand. We withdraw from the conversation. We hope it goes away. Neither one of them does. It just means it bubbles under the surface. And the next time, it's so much quicker to get to that explosion. So finding a safe way of being able to tackle any conversation, no matter how uncomfortable or hard it is. So within that particular secret, there's a really simple 5 steps to being able to handle any conversation and remove the emotion, which if it's interesting, I can share. So the first bit is you've got to share some vulnerability. People feel like they're under attack and think you're doing it because you want to attack them. So sharing something like, I feel really conflicted about having this conversation, or I'm really uncomfortable, whatever it is, that's genuine and authentic.
As a facilitator of the conversation, because I've had to lead this in the past before and it got really weird really fast.
It does, doesn't it? So share something going, I'm really conflicted because you two are both my team members and I want this to really work. And then share why you're doing it. So that obviously you've got some unresolved issues that we need to get through because they're spilling out to the team or whatever it is. And then the third, and for me, this is the crucial one, is state your intention. So what is it you're trying to do by having the conversation?
Yeah.
And I always start most of mine with, I am 100% committed to finding a solution that works for everybody. And the reason why that's such a powerful statement is when I now go in with, and with that in mind, here's my suggestion. If they hate it, they have an allergic reaction and go, that's an awful suggestion, Kim, then yeah, it's fine. Because remember, the intention is to find a solution that works for all of us. It also means if they come back with a solution that just isn't going to work for me, I can go, well, that won't work, but that's okay because I know that our intention is to find one that works for all of us. So what you're doing now is you're playing down here in fact instead of playing up here in emotion.
Interesting.
You've got a common goal, you've got a common purpose. And then you start, when you're into that piece, you start agreeing on the things you can agree rather than focus on the things you can't agree with. Agree on the commonalities. And the reason is that immediately reminds us that we're connected, that we've got trust.
There's more
And
good than there is bad.
it's not everything's wrong. Quite a lot of it's right, actually. Oh, look, we're now down to just this little thing.
A little percentage, right?
So now we can work on that because actually we've seen how much commonality we've got. So you're able to work on that piece and agree the way forward. And I've used that both in work and outside of work to handle some pretty tough conflict
Oh yeah,
situation
no, yeah.
easily. Yeah, to the point where I've had people say, "You're so graceful in the way that you let somebody know that what they're doing isn't right and they need to do something else," that they actually come away. I did a nickname for 20 years in corporate life of the smiling assassin, because they said it
Oh my
wasn't until
gosh.
we realized that you had just given us some really harsh feedback, but you did it in such a nice way. You were so pleasant about it that we found ourselves thanking you. And it was only later where we were like, oh, that was a bit harsh.
Yeah, but this is brilliant though,
Just
because
so brilliant.
everyone has to have these hard conversations
Yeah.
in personal life and in work. And I'm gonna practice this. So that was secret number
So,
5.
so that was secret number 5. Number 6 is how to lead successfully or effortlessly in every situation. Because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Situations change, and we might be really good at leading when things are going well,
Mhm.
but people will see in us what happens when they don't go well. And I use an example many years ago, actually, in corporate life, where I'd gone in, the organization was really struggling, and we got to double digit growth in the first quarter that I was
Wow.
there.
Wow.
And then we had 4 consecutive quarters of double digit growth. So we were doing
Okay.
great.
Oh my gosh.
Everything was going swimmingly. In fact, it was going so well that my boss came to find me and was like, "Can you need to slow it down? Because if not, we're going to have a real challenge next year when they're setting targets about whether or not it's going to be achievable for our division."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay, I can slow it down." This was in July. I said, "How about I run sales. I'll take the sales team on a CSR event, a community support event. You go and help out in a school or in the local community." I said, "Because they never get to go because they're sales. So clearly
Yeah.
they've got like chained to their desk, like just keep going." He was like, "Brilliant idea." It was great in July when things were going well. And then we hit August and we fell off a cliff. It
Oh
was
wow.
horrendous. It was so bad that we added it to September and we called it Augtember, and we bunched both targets together. September was the end of our financial year. And I
Wow.
remember boss coming over and he was like, "Kim, you're going to have to cancel the CSR event." And I was like, "I can't." He said, "What do you mean you can't?" I said, "If I do that, I am no longer relevant in this organization."
Hmm.
Because since the day I joined, I said revenue isn't king. Doing the right thing the right way is king. I said, and if I suddenly change just because we've hit a difficult point, I no longer have credibility as a leader.
Mhm.
And he went, "But if you don't hit the number, that will be your job." And I know if we don't hit the number, that's my job gone. But I know that if I do this to hit the number, that's my job gone anyway,
Yeah.
because I won't ever be credible here anymore. And he kept reminding me how difficult a decision that was going to be, because I'd have to go and stand in front of the board and let them know it was me that chose to do the event,
Mhm.
me that did this. And I was like, "I get it." He goes, "It's your neck on the block." I was like, "I'm aware.
Yeah.
Right? I am aware. And I stand by my conviction that
Hmm.
we will do the right thing. And in doing the right thing, that we will achieve the result." And we went on till on the very last day, we had a significant hill to climb, but I knew we could do it because they were doing the right thing. I had
Mhm.
absolute and utter belief in them. And I remember standing up throughout the day and sharing with them why I believed they were going to be successful, specifically what it was that I needed them to keep doing. And by lunchtime, as they were putting more and more sales up on the board, they were coming up and going, "This one's for you because you believed in us and we believe in you."
Wow.
And hit the number. We just hit it. We smashed it
My gosh.
because what they needed was that belief. And we went on, my boss lauded it around the organization that it was one of the best decisions as a leadership team we'd ever made, was to do
Wow.
this event. Even so, trust me, guys, I was
That
not
was high
enjoying
stress.
it.
That was definitely
But
high
that was the
stress.
decision. But it taught me an amazing lesson, and one that I was able to share actually with a client recently. And they had similar success. They went into their last day of their financial year. They needed £500,000 and they'd never been anywhere near that number. It was a tremendous ask.
Yeah.
And along with the leadership team, we stood up and we kept sharing with them specifically why we believed that they could do it, why they were going to be successful. And at the end of the day, they annihilated their $500,000. And I'm thrilled to say they now regularly have $1 million days.
Wow.
And yet, just a few short months ago, they didn't think it was achievable. And it came down to this one and the next one.
I'm gonna have
So
to read your book. It's too
is
effortless, it sounds. There's
step 7 is building brave belief, building that belief in
the
people. And that's
cornerstone.
what I talk about in my TEDx. It's 12 minutes and it's just to really get people to think about the gift of belief, because it's not just what we believe in ourselves as leaders. We get to, and as human beings, not just as leaders, we can
Yeah.
do
But we
people in
lead we
our
lead
families.
ourselves and others, yeah.
We can give people our belief. And we do it all of the time. Whenever we ask somebody to do something for us, we ask them because we think they can do it. Because
Mhm.
if not, we're just going to set everybody up to look stupid. They'll look stupid, we'll look stupid. It'd just be embarrassing. But we don't tell them why. We don't say, do this project for me, do this job for me. And I'm asking you because I believe you can do it because of this and this. Be specific.
Yeah.
Imagine the impact if the next time we asked anybody to do something for us, we took an extra 30 seconds to share with them why we believe they're the right person and they are set up for success. Imagine how that'll make them feel.
Yeah.
Imagine how it'd make us feel if somebody shared with us why they believed that we were the right person to do whatever it is they asked.
So powerful. And that even goes to the point of like why having others at our corner or hiring a coach or just having a good relationship with those around you and your team, et cetera. Like it goes beyond just like a simple conversation like this, but when you actually see it and live it out and breathe it. But I really want to read your book. When's your book out?
So hopefully it's going to be out around about Easter next year. So I'm just editing the first full edit, which got a little bit waylaid with the text because it took more time than I thought. And
Yeah.
I've been really lucky as well as it being my book and what I've shared over 30 years. I've had the privilege of interviewing 100 other CEOs from
Oh,
around
wow.
the world who are sharing their story as well. So it's not just me and this is what I've seen and done. I've augmented it with, I've gone and asked 100 other people, some of whom I've been privileged to work alongside, and
Wow.
some of whom I've just been privileged to meet and hear their story. But so that hopefully people can see this isn't a one-off, this is replicable, it's doable. I do it all the time with organizations at the moment that have me in as a consultant, which is, trust me, you can do this stuff. It is surprisingly simple, and that's why it's overlooked.
Hmm.
Because people go too simple. It's got to be more
I
complex.
literally said that. I mean,
Yeah, it's got to be more complex. I talk to people all the time and go, Kim, I'm in business and business is complicated. I'm like, okay, it is. Let's talk to me about what that is. So I've got suppliers, and I'm like, they're people. I've got clients, they're people. I've got
oh,
board members, they're people. I've got colleagues, they're people. I've got regulators, they're people.
hmm.
Everybody we deal with is a person. If we get really good at people, the rest becomes much easier. But the challenge that we've got is we first have to get less wedded to being right. And as human beings, we immediately leap to a judgment. We have to, as you pointed out, we had to make sure we were safe. So whatever's happening, we immediately make a decision on it.
Mhm.
So somebody will tell us something, we'll either go, oh, that's right or that's wrong. And then we start to move down, putting our point across. If instead we can practice passionate curiosity, you'd be amazed how much the world opens up. So the next time somebody tells you something that you go, I don't think that's right, instead of saying that, ask them, "Yeah, really interested to learn more because I've never thought of it from that point of view. Could you explain to me how you got
So,
there?"
so tap into their belief and understanding how they arrived to that.
Yeah, just to understand it. But also get curious with yourself. When
Hmm.
you're saying, I think that's wrong, go, that's interesting. I wonder why I'm so adamant that's wrong. What's made me think that? So apply the same level of curiosity inwardly as outwardly. You may still end up not having the same point of view, but you will have opened your mind to a number of steps along the way.
Yeah.
Because that we know to be true is that we live in a world of polarity. For every up, there's a down. For every left, there's a
Yeah.
right.
That's weird, right? Yeah.
So once we realize that and we get less wedded to our version being correct, we can start to see it from the other person's vantage point. And then we start to address a problem from a 360 view
Hmm.
instead of just being able to look
From
at
my
it.
own binary
dimension.
view.
Yeah.
100%. No, this is fascinating for me personally as a leadership experience and learning from you. But for all our listeners out there, what's the best place for them to go to one, thank you for this episode and learn about more what you're up to and hopefully grab the book?
So the best place is to go to authenticachievements.com, where you can find out what we're doing or reach out to me directly if you want to. It's Kim-Adele And I love to hear people's stories. And if you've got any things that are causing you angst at the moment, I'd love to try and help.
Oh, wonderful. We'll put those links in the show notes. Kim-Adele, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a real privilege.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.